All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get started, and I'm sure more people will join as we go through the webinar. Thank you. I'm Matt Edwards, one of the senior managers here at CDW. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how to prevent ransomware with CDW, Lenovo, and Veeam. And just before we go and get started, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background on who CDW is and what our role to play is with this very topic. So if you just move to the next slide. So at CDW, we are the leading IT solutions and services partner in Canada, and we integrate and manage technologies to help customers achieve their desired outcomes. You can go to the next slide. So how did we get there? Well, in 1984, we were founded by Michael Krasny out of Chicago, through a lot of, financial success and, some growth as an organization. We were able to take that success and really invest that back into the business. So you can see kind of along the timeline, we've gone public, we've gone private. There's a few acquisitions that we've made. I would say the first big acquisition that we've made that really kind of gave us a lot of solutions and services expertise was when we did the acquisition in 2015 with a UK-based Kelway company, which is a international services provider, which really gave us international capability to deliver on solutions globally. And then closer to home, we followed that up in 2019 with an acquisition of Scalar Decisions here in Canada, which really expanded our solutions and services practice in country. So go to the next slide. And so what does that mean for our customers? It gives you experience you can trust. It gives you, you're dealing with an organization that has strong financial backing. But more importantly, I think, is that you get access to a lot of our technical resources. So you see that we've got a very strong ecosystem of traditional and emerging partners. We've got 2,000 technical engineer resources. We've got a large professional services practice. We do a lot of extensive training for our account managers, and we're able to configure a lot of the solutions that we put together before they're ever shipped to you as a customer. And the next slide. And another important thing too is to notice that not only can we do this out of one location, in Canada, we do this across the country. So we do have 9 offices across the country in all of the major cities. So our expertise is not really located just to one location. We have this throughout east to west. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jamie and Jason to take us through the rest of the presentation. And sorry, one more thing to mention for the Q&A side. We've decided to change it up. Typically, we're going to use that, at the end of the presentation. For this one, if you do have a question throughout, please ask it in the Q&A box, and we'll actually kind of address it live throughout the presentation. And turn over to Jamie.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. So I am Jamie O'Hearn, the Technical Partner Manager for Veeam, dedicated to CDW, just by way of introduction real quick. And you can see my background. It's actually a virtual, oh, my hands just disappeared. It's a virtual background. I am not currently in the tropics. I live in Chicago, so I'm based essentially in the headquartered area where CDW is located, or the global headquarters. I spent close to 14 years with CDW before I moved over to Veeam about 3 years ago. So just wanted to quickly introduce myself, and then before we go into the Veeam piece, let me let Jason introduce himself as well, since his name's on the board. Jason, you want to give a quick background?
Hey everybody, I'm Jason Wagner. I'm the technical lead for CDW, Lenovo badge, but only work with CDW, both in the States and in Canada. And thanks so much for joining today. Always excited to work with Jamie O'Hearn. He and I go way back. I too worked at CDW here in the States. I live not too far from Chicago myself. And Jamie and I go way back. I worked with CDW for about 12 years and with Lenovo for the last 4. Always in the data center, always following the cable. So look forward to your questions. Thanks, James.
Cool. Yeah, great. Thanks. So we'll dig into things. As you can tell, this is really a joint presentation. We're going to start with the Veeam side of things, and the focus here, what we want to address is the scary word ransomware. So if you want to continue on, Matt, to the next slide. I think the next slide is my favorite one, actually. Yeah, watch this. The graphics are great. Progress through, and you can see how it turns into a kind of horror story. Hopefully this works. WebEx, sometimes the animations don't work right, but here we go. I think it's, yeah, there we go. So it turns into ransomware. It's supposed to start flashing, because you get scared and whatever. So continue on. We'll go through. So what is ransomware? I probably don't have to define this for everyone on the call. We all, for the most part, are aware of what ransomware is, and that it's generally a bad thing. It locks your data, either with CryptoLocker, which I think I've got a slide that talks about the different types of ransomware with CryptoLocker, or system lockers. So we'll continue on. We'll kind of breeze through the first few slides as we get into the kind of the Veeam position on this. So there we go, ransom lockers and crypto lockers. Crypto lockers meaning, the data itself is actually encrypted, and user files and so on and so forth are potentially deleted, and they're not returned until the ransom is paid. Ransom lockers, of course, is another nefarious software piece where you lose access to your systems until you pay the ransom to gain access back, both of which are bad. And I think prior to the session, we got a question of how does Veeam protect against that or prevent it? And we're gonna talk a little bit about it, but I'm gonna be upfront and say we are not a security company. So while we have a story around how we can address ransomware in terms of mitigation, identification, and recovery, I don't know that there's anyone in the world who would stake their claim on being able to protect against or prevent ransomware. Ransomware is unfortunately probably a non-preventable reality in the world of today. And I know everyone's on mute, but if Jason or if anybody else has any conflicting viewpoint on that, I think that that's probably a realistic expectation, and that what we try to accomplish with our tools is to be able to provide the fastest recovery and identification of an attack, from a ransomware, malware deployed solution or deployed software. So if you want to continue on to the next piece. So that said, detection is kind of where everything starts from the Veeam beginning of the story. So we have maybe the best kept secret in our platform is Veeam 1. Veeam 1 comes as a part of our Veeam availability suite. Everybody knows Veeam backup replication, so I don't know if those who are on the phone are currently Veeam users using Veeam to back up and replicate their workloads. But Veeam 1 is our analytics tool, and it's got a ton of great alerts and alarms and reports and things you can do, like Business View, where you can group things together that make logical business sense. But one of the things that we have built in is a predefined alarm for ransomware. So it's a ransomware alarm that can detect suspicious activity on a VM. So things like the CPU and memory spike. We also have the ability to look at the back. If we see irregular incrementals, we can throw some flags out there saying, hey, your incrementals are normally this size and now they're growing because of potentially a ransom, something that's encrypting the data and causing it to look unique to our tools. That's the first stage as far as mitigation. So when I talk about this, from a sort of an analogy standpoint, I think of it like the fire extinguisher you have in your kitchen, where you may, like me, be a terrible cook, and the stove might catch on fire because you just don't know what you're doing. But you've got the fire extinguisher there to put it out. Now, you might lose the stove. You might even lose the whole kitchen. But the idea is that this is here to hopefully identify and recognize and mitigate anything that's actively taking place. We, like I said, are not a security company, so we don't have the ability to see something as it's inbound. It has to land first. And I think if you go to the next slide, we will start to see kind of where that comes in. So, a few slides, so bear with me on this. The fundamentals of data protection, we talk about this a lot. I do on my, probably every day, multiple times a day. I talk about the 3-2-1 rule, 3 copies of your data, 2 different media types, one of them being offsite. These are all fundamentally, ransomware protection best practices, right? So having the 3rd copy and having it offsite on a different media type, you can see we've even got a tape illustrated there. or offsite in the cloud. So there's a lot of different options, and we'll talk about kind of how we address that and get things to public cloud to a certain extent, and even the private cloud and the service provider clouds all would act as essentially offsite solutions for this one rule. And then the last one is the zero. So again, the 3-2-1 rule is not unique to Veeam. This is an industry standard adherence to the 3-2-1 rule. We add the zero, and the reason we add the zero functionality built into our platform called Data Labs that we can pick up and share replica. And I think in the very last piece of my presentation I talked about that, but just put that in your back pocket for now. So again, our rule is 3-2-1, 3 copies of your data, 2 different media types, one of them offsite, and that there are no errors. And I'll add to that, and that the last piece is not only is there no errors, but there's no malware. Okay, so again, I'll get to that nearing the end of this. But if you want to go to the next slide. A lot of this has to do with utilizing the tools that we provide as far as designing your environment, your backup environment for that cyber recovery. So I talked about Veeam 1 and the detection tools that we've got, the alerts and the alarms, and I won't go through all the different bullet points here, but some of the things that I will touch on later on here, like for example, the staged restores, something that we provide in that Data Labs functionality where we can actually stage backup mount server and be able to interact with it using scripts in order to potentially eradicate data. So for example, if you found that you had a virus somewhere, you could mount the disks to a mount server and then interact with it to mitigate that problem before you restore it back into production. Right? The 3-2-1 backup rule, we talked about that. Sure backup, meaning the ability to scan a backup file, or I shouldn't say scan a backup file, spin up a virtual machine into a isolated Data Labs environment and then verify that it's recoverable if there was ever a need to recover it before you have to get to that point that you're recovering something. So Sure Backup is a tool that we have that I think is really unique, and it's really a powerful tool that everybody should be using. And then some other pieces too. Enhanced NAS recovery, new to our platform within the last year. We've added a beyond NDMP an enhanced NAS that backups and provide really slick recover and roll back and do not incremental, but item level recoveries using a console that's very similar to, it's actually in the same console, but a similar feel and flow as we would do with a virtual machine. So we'll continue on. If you can go to the next slide, I think it's kind of a good one to touch on here. Oh yeah, there's the graphics here where we can show the little detection moving from before and after the protection. All right, so not going to go through again the entire backup flow because I don't think that we have the time and whatnot, but I will touch on the pieces that are highlighted here as far as some of the integration points, and particularly as it pertains to our partnership with Lenovo. So going in order, the storage snapshots is one of the areas that we find as far as mitigation from ransomware can become very, very helpful. So, in that scenario where you've got Veeam 1 deployed and Veeam 1 is detecting a ransomware attack potentially, maybe it makes sense to do a quick storage snapshot of your storage array that's the underlying storage for those virtual machines and presenting storage to them. So you can take that storage snapshot and have it available to you for recovery if need be, right? So that's one of the integration points that in the backup flow that we wanted to talk about, at least initially. Instant VM restore. So let's take it from the standpoint that now you've got a ransomware affected virtual machine and you need to get that service back online as quickly as possible for end users and customers and whoever else to work with. We can actually use the backup storage as the underlying storage mount to be able to present that VM back to the general public. So instant to do that. It's a proprietary technology that I shouldn't say proprietary. It's not. It was something that we invented 15 years ago or so, and have enhanced. Actually, we should be referring to that now as multiple instant VM restore, because we now have the ability to restore many machines all at once, as opposed to just a single machine at a time. The third piece on here is the Veeam Cloud Connect. So I talked about that the 1 in the 3-2-1 rule, having one of your backups offsite. So we have a network of, I think it's about 35,000 different what we call VCSPs, Veeam Certified Service Providers, that are scattered across the globe. that provide resources for you to be able to offload backups to a service provider's cloud. So you have the ability to get things out of your environment, off of your domain, and they would then have the ability to restore if you lost everything to a ransomware attack. That would be the third piece there. Fourth piece, immutability. So I touched on the tape and the little cloud in the 2 and the 1 and the 3-2-1 rule. Immutability is really a hot topic now. I talk a lot about it, and we have integration as long as it's S3 compatible object level immutability. We can write to it. So example of that, and where we see the most use is probably in AWS, where AWS has their immutable S3 buckets. Within our console, we allow you to set parameters on how long you want your backup data to be immutable. So if you wanted to, perhaps make it, write protected for 7 days or 14 days or 30 days, it's your prerogative to do so. You can do that through our console and then use the immutability at the object level, or object level immutability in AWS. And then the last piece here is data labs. I touched on this already, but we'll get into it a little bit deeper as far as one of the things that we call secure restore. So secure restore is another tool that we have available to us to mitigate, or I should say, recover from a potential ransomware attack. Before we move on to the next slide, any questions out there?
Jamie, yeah, I've got one. I thought I would ask a question, Jamie, real quick. So the ransomware incident takes place. The IT admin learns about that through some sort of alert. Is that how it works?
Yep. Yeah. So long as you have the alarm enabled in Veeam 1, we can detect, and it's not all ransomware attacks that we can detect. I'll be honest. I mean, this is the idea is that Veeam 1 is constantly looking at your virtual infrastructure, and it can detect things like irregularities in CPU and memory usage. And that's truthfully the alarm is looking for those things. If it sees those things, it can alert you by either using an email or a text alert. It can use, you actually can enable it to do things on your behalf. For example, if you were really concerned about it and happening in the middle of the night, for example, you could delegate the power to Veeam 1 to actually shut down that VM on your behalf.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about. I mean, I'm no Veeam expert, of course, but Veeam 1 it's an addition to, let's say, your backup recovery suite of products, right? So it's probably that investment because there is some automation or some help and scripting that allows you to set these things into motion, this 1 through 5 that you're basically talking about here.
Yeah, more or less, right. So yeah, Veeam 1, like I said, is part of our Veeam availability suite. So Veeam, the availability suite consists of both the Veeam backup and replication software as well as Veeam 1, licensed, in a similar fashion. So basically as we call it, per instance now. So per virtual machine is how we would license that.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Great. Any questions in the Q&A out there, Matt? If not, we can continue on.
I think we can continue on.
All right. So snapshot. So that was the first on our list is the snapshot piece. And it's not moving. Next slide. There we go. Snapshots versus backup. Of course, as I mentioned, I mean, we are unabashedly a backup platform. We've started our, existence as a backup platform for virtualization, and we will never get away from that. And we still believe that backups are truly a necessity when it comes to complete data protection story and strategy. However, snapshots can provide a lot of value when it comes to being able to create an instantly create a image level point in time recovery for primary storage. So we have integration with, it's probably in the 20s now, storage arrays that we can orchestrate snapshots with. And I think we're one of the, if not, we are by far the leader in terms of how many we have integration with. But Lenovo has been in our platform for a really long time. So the Lenovo, and correct me, Jason, is it the DS series? Is that the? I've lost track of all the different series. Arrays. Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah,
that's
I lose track because there's so many different ones. But yeah, so we have integration, snapshot level backups. Not only for a snapshot for that point in time recovery, but also as source for your backup data as we would write it to backup storage in the VBK or VIB or VRB file format, depending on how we're writing it. So again, two benefits from a snapshot integration standpoint. Number one is that short RPO recovery point in time, and then the other option or the other benefit is that we have access to a snapshot, so we can shorten the amount of time that we're quiescing or freezing the VM as we write the backup to the backup repository. If you want to go to the next slide, we've got a nice little table that shows the sort of benefits of both the backup versus a snapshot. And you can see, working together, you can fill all of these different criteria, right? So the snapshot is instantly created, which clearly improves your RPO because it can shorten it down to you could potentially take a snapshot every 5 minutes, right? Very space efficient because it's really only storing change blocks and whatnot. And then it has the ability to provide us a quick restore of the data, so your RTO is very short too. But what snapshots lack, things like long-term retention, human mistakes, snapshot doesn't really have any way of cataloging itself. We have to do it for it, right? That kind of thing. We can't do the error check, corruption check, or sure backup as we call it in the backup world. And then there's some other pieces there too, like the off-site copy and so on and so forth.
So Jamie, for the folks out there in the audience, so the snapshot in this table here that's coming from Lenovo, right? That's your DE, your DM
Correct.
series. That's being provided by the software based upon the storage array, and the backup is the Veeam sauce coming into the mix. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, exactly. So the back would be putting everything into our format, so that it's in Veeam's file format. I throw those terms out there. VBK is our file type for a full backup, and then VRB, VIB are the two, one being reverse, one being forward incremental. But yeah, we would write those files through a backup process where we convert the data into our format and then store it on a backup repository. Snapshots are truly just utilizing or interacting with the Lenovo software to be able to orchestrate and take a backup. A snapshot.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yep. The cool thing is that if you're familiar with the Veeam platform, and we don't have time to get into all the different explorers, but if you want to go to the next slide, I will touch on one of the we have built in that kind of bridges the gap between your software and our software, is that we have the Veeam Explorer for storage snapshots. So we've got Veeam Explorers for, I think there's 6 different Explorers out there now. We're adding another one for Teams coming in the near future, but we've got Explorers for things like SharePoint, Exchange, SQL, Oracle, Active Directory, and so on and so forth, that provide a single pane of glass interface to be able to perform item level recoveries. So these are not third-party software tools that we've integrated in. This is actually Veeam software that we've built from the ground up. And we have this Veeam Explorer for storage snapshots to allow us the ability to, again, recover item level recovery out of a storage snapshot, as opposed to having to remount the entire snapshot and use that as a quote unquote backup, if you will. We can actually do the granular recovery. So it provides that ability to provide an SLA back to your end users based on a short RPO using storage snapshots. Now, I wouldn't rely solely on your storage snapshots. I would use those as a periodic short-term backup that you might take between points in time. So if you're doing a backup every night, you might have a storage snapshot every hour. So you've got 24 different storage snapshot increments, if you will, in between the full backup, or I should say incremental backup, likely mostly every night, and then maybe a weekly full, and so on and so forth. So a lot of these things are dependent on what the retention needs are for the organization, but these storage snapshots do provide that, and we then take that to the next level, being able to provide granular recovery.
And let's face it, with snaps, the big issue with them is management of them. They can get out of hand, and they can get out of hand fast. I'm sure a lot of the folks out there listening to this webinar have had, snapshot overload and trying to keep track of things. So it sounds like the Veeam software is going to do a really good job of organizing that and keeping that straight.
Yep, Yeah, and we actually have built in kind of in the background a tool called Snapshot Hunter, which Snapshot Hunter essentially does that. Looks for orphan snapshots that are out, living in the array that don't have a purpose, and we can go and eradicate those. But the Explorer tool is our recovery option for snapshots, and then that Snapshot Hunter. We have a lot of different, like I said, snapshot integration when it comes to production level storage, and like I said, Lenovo is one of our top partners for that.
And this is, again, Jamie, all part of the availability suite that you referenced earlier.
Yep. Yeah, that's all built into this is all actually part of the Veeam backup and replication. So Veeam 1 is the add-on piece for the analytics, and then backup and replication provides us these tools.
Awesome.
We can probably move on to the next exciting topic, which is our NAS backup. So again, I mentioned that this was new within the last year when we released version 10. It's been long on our roadmap, actually. I think we've been talking about it for 5 or 6 years, but we've been working on a slick way to back up and recover file shares more similarly to the way that we back up and recover from a virtual environment, in the ways that we rooted ourselves back in 2005 when the company was founded. So, as we all know, NDMP is not a very graceful backup tool. It's cumbersome. It requires a lot of full backups, and it just takes up a lot of space. And the recovery options are pretty limited as far as what you can recover to, because of the fact that it's proprietary to the storage device that you're taking the NDMP out of, and so on and so forth. So we've created our own new, what we call enhanced NAS backup or file share backup, however you want to call it. I think it's called file share backup in our console. The marketing team has a different name for it, but essentially, the cool part about it, well, there's two things. Number one, it's really efficient. So the quick story on it is our development team was putting this all together. When they were going through the final paces of it, they wanted to test against a large file set, so they downloaded all of Wikipedia from the web. And the Wikipedia download was something like 20 terabytes, but it was like 16 million files. So they went and they did a seed backup, which took several hours. I think it was like 6 or 7 hours to provide, to seed the backup with all of that data. And then they went back and they made a whole bunch of different changes in the files and deleted things and changed words and whatever else they did. And they went and did an incremental backup. The incremental backup took 14 minutes. Most of the time actually was for cleanup and setup. So, we use a very unique proprietary change file tracking system to be able to provide efficient incremental backups and retention for the long-term offsite and things like that. So, from a restore perspective, and as it pertains to ransomware, we provide 3 primary restore options for NAS backup. And NAS tends to be one of the targets for ransomware attacks a lot of times. So, we can provide these 3 different restore options right through our console. The entire share restore. So if you knew that you were infected with ransomware, we can restore that entire share, and we can restore it anywhere else. It doesn't have to come or go back to the same file system that it was on originally. We can restore it to a different place. It doesn't need to like I said, sit on the same kind of storage, unlike NDMP. We can roll back to a point in time. So this is probably more likely what you'll see is that if you can pick a point in time before the attack took place, and you've now got the guards available to protect the file share, you could roll back to a point in time, maybe at 9 p.m. or whatever. When you notice the encryption taking place through Veeam 1, now you to that point in time before that. Or, of course, we have the ability to restore individual files and folders, so granular restores, similar to the Explorer that we just looked at for storage snapshots. We have for file shares, so we can restore all those out.
Hey, Jamie, not all NAS devices are created equal, right? And I would love it if everybody out there had a DM series that had, unified approach to storage, both file and block, et cetera. But with NAS, you could have a whole lot of file servers out there. You could have a whole lot of low-hanging NAS devices. Does it, not to put you on the spot, but does it, how does it see all the different arrays that could be in a customer's environment? Does it see if it's NFS or CIFS or SMB type protocols out there? How does it work?
No, we just have to map to the file share. So really the same way you would map somebody's drive, somebody's machine to a file share, we map to the same file share using the VDR console, and then just create the backup policy. We want to retain things. Or versions we want to keep with the files. That's really it. So we can, like I said, there could be an environment that has a large number of those files, or Linux file servers, or SMB, CIF, you name it. We can consolidate all of that. We can restore it all back to a single place. We can do all sorts of different things with it.
Yeah, another nice way to maybe organize a customer's environment, because I'm speaking to customers all the time who are looking at their first centralized NAS array, if you will, after having a lot of years of file servers on their environment. So this could be a nice way for them to consolidate that as well.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those sometimes those file servers can kind of grow like weeds.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's continue on. Unless there's any questions out there at all in the Q&A. I don't think I see any, but we'll move on. I think the next piece.
I'm thinking for everybody, Jamie. So it's just all being channeled through me. So that's where these questions.
That's okay. I think we were just touching on this anyway. So I guess the integration points that we wanted to touch on. We already talked about NAS and the storage snapshots. And the snapshot orchestration. So hopefully this is just a kind of a recap of what we've been discussing. But the data labs, which I think we're going to touch on here as we wrap up, maybe the last piece might be the only thing left over. But anything you wanted to touch on? I think it's pretty self-evident that we've got a lot of integration there at the storage level.
No, you're setting the table for sure. I'll definitely talk about our DM series, but it's great to see the integration with Veeam version 10.
Great. So we'll move on to the next slide. Instant VM recovery. So I mentioned this. This is, again, it's a tool that we have available to provide quick restore of a virtual machine. Look what this slide build out. I think it's going to kind of take us through a scenario where we lose a VM there in the hypervisor, and then we can spin that up and mount the storage from the backup storage. If the slide doesn't build out, then we'll have to. There we go. Yeah. And so the idea here is, again, we have lost a VM, and we can use our vPower, which is an NFS mount that we use on the backup storage to present the storage to the virtual machine back into production within a matter of minutes. I always looked at this like a spare tire. So the idea being that you've got a workload that you need to provide access to. Maybe in this case a ransomware has infected it, so we've got to shut it down, blow it away, and then rebuild it from a backup. We can do that in a matter of minutes, so that you don't have to wait for the storage to be migrated all the way back over from backup to the production. And you can do that, at your leisure at a point in time that makes sense. So we would maybe use the after business hours, overnight, to schedule the vMotion of that storage from the backup storage to production, and then that way your end users really don't see any interaction. So this slide is actually one that we've had in our deck for a really long time. In version 10, we have the ability to actually do multiple VM restore. As of version 10, as of earlier this year, we can do that with more than just one. In fact, if you wanted to, you could restore your entire environment. I wouldn't probably recommend running the entire environment off of backup storage, depending on what your backup storage is. Obviously, mileage may vary, but we do have that capability now to be able to affect a large or a multiple instant VM restore.
Any caveats there, Jamie, with hypervisor support?
No. So from a hypervisor standpoint, I think we've got the generic hypervisor listed there, but vSphere, Hyper-V, and to some extent AHV, but we'll primarily vSphere and Hyper-V are the two hypervisors that I would recommend using this for.
Awesome. And
really, the process is about the same for both. There's some under the covers differences with how the data gets mounted as it pertains to vSphere and Hyper-V, but that's more of a VMware Microsoft argument that I don't like to get involved in.
Yeah, if any of the attendees out there want to throw into the chat any other type of hypervisor that they're using in their environment, I'm sure we'll see a lot of VMware and Microsoft. But if there is some sort of open source KVM, what have you, that'd be good to know. Not something maybe we dive in now, but almost like a poll, like what type of hypervisors are being used out there.
Yeah.
If you want to put in something.
Yeah, and these tools are really focused mostly on the two large ones, Hyper-V and vSphere. But
right on.
We'll continue on if you, Robert, to to the Cloud Connect piece. So, if you're not, currently set up in an environment where you have access to an offsite, that you want to use as potentially a restore point, or even just a repository as a service, backup storage as a service. We have, like I said, 35 or so thousand different global partners. CDW does a lot of work with a handful in North America. I think Island comes to mind, and there's probably a handful of other ones that I'm forgetting. But the menu of options as far as some of the services they provide can be extensive. Everything from just backup as a service, not backup, but backup repositories as a service, so storage as a service, all the way to fully managed backup as a service, even things like replication locations, so infrastructure as a service available to replicate to. And it's a practice that we've had in place for a long time. One of the things that kind of makes Veeam great is that we really turn a lot of these responsibilities over to our partners, whether it be CDW or the network of cloud service providers there to deliver what makes Veeam great. So we really focus on the software and allow those partners that can be experts in the different platform services that they provide to do their thing.
That's great.
Flip the next, I think the next session we're going to talk about the immutability piece a little bit. So touched on this already. It's part of our capacity tier, as you can see there in the top. And what that means is that we, about 1.5 to 2 years ago, introduced object storage support as a tier within our scale-out backup repository. So for all of you non-Veemers, what that means is that we have for a long time had a storage repository configuration that allowed us to group together unlike storage extents into what we called SOBR, or scale-out backup repository. It was a single namespace that you could point backup jobs to. Like you had, a Windows server and a NAS and a deduplication device of some kind, and you wanted to have them all act as a single repository target for a backup job. Then the SOBR, if you will, would determine which of those extents was the most suitable for your backup job to be written. Go ahead and do that. We've now added in, at least the last couple of years, the ability to tier off into the capacity tier. We now call that what was legacy SOBR, the performance tier, and now provide the capacity tier, which is object storage that can be set to either copy. So as soon as the backups are written to the performance tier, can be written immediately to the object tier or the capacity tier, if you will, or move, which means that we would write to the first layer of disk. So that grouping of NAS, Windows Server, and deduplication device would hold there for a set period of time, let's say 7 days or whatever makes sense. And then after that, move the data off to the object storage of your choosing. So with that, as I mentioned, we have integration on that layer with the S3 immutability. The S3 is an object level immutable storage. So I know AWS Cloudian is one that provides it. There might be a couple of other ones out there, but primarily what we see is mostly with AWS. And it seems as though that's a technology that is still up and coming. There's a lot of object storage players out there that are trying to catch up and provide that level of immutability at the object level. You do see it at the bucket level. We don't have integration at the bucket level because of the way that we handle it, and that's a long conversation that we can't get into now, but it is important to note that we do provide this as really an alternative to tape, because it provides a write protect copy of your data that, based on the policy that you set, keeps it write protected for a period of time, say 7 days or a month or whatever the period of time that you need it to be write protected for.
I don't know, Jamie. Tape forever. That's all I got to say. It's tape forever.
Not going away.
LTO 35.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yep, not going away. Tape still is a suitable option. It's truthfully, one of the few ways that you can actually remove data completely offline and be able to be fully protected from any kind of ransomware attack. Short of mutability would be the next closest.
Jamie, I've had 2 new tape library opportunities this week. Yep. So the Lenovo TS 4300 still going strong. It's
yeah, I talk about tape all the time.
Awesome.
All the time. Yep. So let's go on moving along to the next piece, which I think is where we're kind of wrapping things up. So Secure Restore, I think I touched on this too. So Secure Restore is built into our Data Labs technology. This is, I think, we might have 2 more slides, but the Secure Restore piece is one that whenever I show it to people, it really wows you. So think of this as, if you will, our ability to predetermine whether or not a backup is suitable for recovery. And by that, what I mean is, you can see that on this chart at the bottom, you've got this malicious file that's downloaded. We've then taken a backup. You can tell based on the timeline the backup was taken after the malicious file was downloaded. Then once the backup's taken, your AV vendor is aware of this malicious file. So now there's a signature that gets written and is released out into the world. And you can then detect that malicious file before restore. So if you could continue on to the next slide, I think we'll be able to better visualize kind of how that process works in our world. So now let's build this whole thing out, even though I know there's some flow chart that happens. So there we go. So what happens is, in the worst case scenario, this malware, this ransomware is attacking you. Your Veeam one, maybe you didn't have it turned on or you weren't paying attention and it encrypted stuff, and you've now got a point where you're like, well, I got to go back and recover with this VM that's been affected. How do I do it? So we go back and we say, well, we don't know exactly when that file was ingested because it's a 0-day attack that had a ticking time bomb on it. It could have been a week, it could have been a month, whatever. So we'll go pick a point in time that we think we might be clean. So what we do is we perform what we call this secure restore during the restore process. It's a checkbox that you click that actually spins or doesn't spin up, it mounts the backup disk into this mount server, and then we scan against the disk for known viruses. Now, if there's an infection that's found, we can do one of 2 things. Well, first, let's start with there's no infection found. You've hit the jackpot. You can recover your VM back into production, and you're good to go. Now, if we find an infection, we can predetermine as we go through the recovery process what's going to happen if that takes place. So we can do one of 2 things. We can either stop and restore. Clearly, that makes sense if you don't have any remediation software or abilities to eradicate the malware, and you have a previous backup before that you're willing to go back to. So let's say, for example, again, you've arbitrarily or based on some knowledge, you went back a week and you find that, well, it is infected. We've got a backup from 8 days ago we can try as well. So maybe we just go back another day or whatever the case may be. So we can also we can abort it. We also can restore the VM back in if we're pretty confident that we have software or some ability to eradicate that attack. We can restore it back in, but we do so without any network connectivity. So we would disable the network ports so that you can go in and that you'd like before turning those on. It doesn't infect the rest of the environment. I think there's one more click if you could, Robert, the predefined backup. There we go. Yep. So I mentioned that early on, we are not a security platform, but we do in this case have security software built into our console or into our platform. So we've got integration with Windows Defender, ESET, and Symantec, and I think Kaspersky now too. So this slide might be a little outdated, but we've got those 4. If you have software that you're also using that has command line integration, we have the ability to ingest that in as an XML file into our NetApp server too. So, but those are the 3, or I should say 4, that come out of the box.
Jamie, you mentioned something in the first part of this secure restore. Should a customer, and we did get some questions before the presentation today about best practices. Is there a best practice around testing your backup? How do you test a backup?
Yeah, good question. So we didn't get into the Data Labs Sure Backup, but Sure Backup is an automated process that leverages our Data Labs technology, and there are a whole host of best practices. In fact, we didn't talk about hardening the environment either, but that's listed in our Veeam Best Practices Guide, which you can find at veeambp.com, and you can go through there, and there's a whole host of, like I said, best practices on when and how to provide some of these functions.
Because I imagine a customer is going to want to test their backup periodically, right? Just to make sure that it is working properly in case of an issue.
Yep. So Sure Backup. I mean, you can test it. You can build it in as part of the job. So you can create a Sure Backup job that's triggered as soon as a backup gets. And so every night, for example, you could verify that backup is recoverable, or you can schedule it to do once a week, once a month, whatever is your preference. It doesn't impact any production environments, so you're not going to have any delays or impact to your production to be able to do that. So yeah, that would be something you would probably want to do on a periodic basis to verify that your backups are recoverable. People like to know that they can recover from a disaster if they need to.
Definitely. Is that it? Are we done with
I think that's
software?
what we, yeah.
Oh man.
That's it. It's all you know, Jason.
Oh, this is exciting. I mean, Veeam is cool. There's a lot of great features and functionality, and software is awesome. But man, I'm still a screwdriver kind of guy. Let's get it out of the box. Let's open it up. Let's put it in a rack. And I'm sorry, Jamie, you guys can't do that. No screwdrivers in your world.
That's right.
Sorry. So
virtual
everybody,
screwdrivers, yeah.
right. So everybody, again, I'm Jason Wagner. I support CDW from a technical perspective, talking with customers like yourself, talking to account managers, and everybody in between, trying to get them excited about Lenovo DCG. And in the audience today, we've got Garrett Eames and Kevin LaRock, my two partners in crime on the sales side of things. Garrett is with Lenovo, a channel account manager looking after CDW, and Kevin is CDW badged and rocking and rolling, putting together configurations and all sorts of fun stuff for you guys out there. So I would be nothing without these two gentlemen. Next slide, please. So Lenovo's go-to-market is really based upon two things: reliability and performance. And I guess that's not earth-shattering to hear. But when Lenovo purchased the x86 business and storage business from IBM in 2014, IBM has done a pretty good job of setting up a reputation of being reliable and having great performance. There was that term that was out there that no one's ever been fired for buying IBM. So our go-to-market was to continue along those lines. So thankfully, and with a lot of work and effort for the last 7 years, we've been able to do that. Number one in server reliability, time and time again. The most benchmarks in all of our competition combined. And when we purchased that x86 business, I think folks out there were concerned that we're going to take that legacy, that hardware legacy, and do something bad to it to just simplify things. But it couldn't be further from the truth. We're doing a lot of cool stuff. We've got a 4U8 processor, mission critical box, the SR950, something that IBM was never able to do, additional blades and dense offerings and water cooled and all sorts of neat stuff. So R&D, technology, resilience, that's still part of our DNA, and it always will be part of the DNA of Lenovo DCG. At CDW, I think they sell like $1.8 billion worth of our laptops. So imagine a few in the audience may even have a Lenovo ThinkPad or something in your environment. And let's face it, that same approach to quality, that same approach to reliability on the client side is certainly strong on the DCG side of things as well. Next slide, please. So 2 years ago, it'll be 3 years in November. So just coming on our 3-year anniversary, Lenovo and NetApp came together to provide the Lenovo storage offering. And Jamie and I alluded to it a couple times. That's the DE series, the DM series, and we're gonna dive into that a little bit in the last 9 minutes here. But this relationship makes a whole lot of sense. The Lenovo and NetApp relationship. Let's face it, NetApp is tier one storage software. It's been around for a lot of years, tried and true. They've got their ONTAP, a software that everybody knows about. They've got their Centricity software, is maybe a little less known, but is rock solid and has been for a lot of years. So with this partnership, NetApp gets to really tweak and look after their software both on-prem and into the cloud, and we're able to provide what we're unapologetically good at, and that's hardware. We love hardware. So this allows NetApp to grow their software, their cloud initiative. We want to provide the very best hardware for NetApp on-prem. And that's where the relationship comes from. So if you're looking for the best performing NetApp software out there, just like we talked about with performance with our servers, it's to really see the realization of Lenovo storage and being able to execute that. Next slide, please. So this slide is a little bit of an eye chart, but basically just shows that for every NetApp solution out there, there's a Lenovo storage solution. So again, that could be their ONTAP software, which in the NetApp world, that's a FAS or an all-flash array. For with us, that's the DM series, starting at the 3000 and going up to the 7000. And with the DE series, Lenovo calls the DE series, NetApp has the E series, same Centricity software, same model numbers, and the DE for us will correspond to an E series, but you're going to get the same either hybrid or flash approach. So it's across the board. There is no extra stuff from NetApp that you're missing with Lenovo storage. In fact, it's actually a little bit interesting that Lenovo is able to offer something that NetApp can't. So let's next slide, please. So the DE and the DM, Jamie alluded to many times today, backup and recovery. So backup recovery, well, I think you're still kind of thinking cheap and deep as far as storage is concerned. You're looking at not a ton of functionality. We certainly talked about Snapshots. Both of these series of products are going to provide that. It's all going to be integrated with Veeam and the great technology that Jamie talked about. The DE is a little bit more entry level in the sense that it is just a block storage, where DM is that full ONTAP premium software that provides unified both file and block. Like when Jamie was talking about NAS support, I started thinking about the DM and all its capability. We talk about Snap Vault and all the great Snap functionality that comes with ONTAP software. That's what you get within the DM series. Next slide. So one of the cool offerings within Lenovo Storage and the DM series, and that again is your unified file and block portfolio of products, is something called fundamental software. So ONTAP is feature rich. Everyone knows that. And it's, there's a price associated with it, no doubt about it. But fundamentals is actually a slightly stripped down version of the ONTAP features, really kind of concentrating on what customers are using the most of. So as you can see here, it can scale, but it can only scale to 84 drives as opposed to 144 drives. It can do asynchronous replication as opposed to synchronous replication. Again, there's a time and place for synchronous replication. There's a time and place for scaling to 144 drives, and there's a time and place for a lot of other features and function. But a lot of times customers aren't even utilizing that, or they're not going to that depth and capacity. So why pay for it? So the DM series, the DM 3000 and the 5000H that you see here on this grid allow you to enter into ONTAP software, maybe utilizing just what you need today with a migration path to full premium license if you need it. So you definitely have the ability to upgrade and get all the way to the full premium, but this might be a really nice place to start. And the DM series will talk and replicate with your existing NetApp series, your NetApp FAS that might be in your environment today. It allows you to talk to that device as well. So maybe a secondary location, the DM 3000H might be a great place to start, because you could have that data center in that secondary location and that we'll see eye to eye without the full cost of a full premium ONTAP software. Next slide. So just to finish, and this is my final slide, is the DE series again is probably the better tool for your backup and recovery that Jamie talked about. It allows you to scale to petabytes. It allows for a large form factor drives. You're not playing by the rules of ONTAP, which have some sizing rules that we have to follow. This is a little bit more straightforward blocks storage if it's fiber channel or iSCSI or even SAS attached. I imagine Jamie sees a lot of environments where there's a backup server with some storage attached to it. We certainly can hit all those flavors and all those capacities. And that's, I believe that's my last slide. So I did want to open it up for Q&A. Anything out there, Matthew or Robert, you guys seen anything?
I haven't seen anything in the Q&A, but you guys did a great job of kind of going back and forth throughout the presentation. So hopefully a lot of the questions then were answered kind of throughout. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, you got it, of course. And Jamie, I'm going to speak for you here. If any additional questions come up, I mean, we're just an email away. So Jamie and I are both dedicated only to CDW. This is our day job. This is what we do all the time. So bring those questions. If you want to jump on a call and dive into something specific to your environment, we're only all too happy to do so. Jamie,
Right.
Did I steal your words?
No, that's perfect. That's exactly it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jason.
Right, perfect. Thanks, Jamie and Jason, and thank you everyone for attending today. If you do have any follow-up questions, as you heard, Jamie and Jason are an email away. You can certainly always reach out to your account manager for any additional questions that you didn't get to ask during the webinar. With that, I think we will close off today's session, and once again, thank you everyone for attending.